Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back. We're still on our mission to finish first in fantasy rugby. Just a quick preview of what's to come. I'll look over all the key matchups for this weekend, point over some key players that I think are good pickups, have a bit of a stats deep dive, and then give you my trades and captaincy advice. Just quickly too, definitely didn't set the world on fire in round one. We're sitting around 27,000 overall. It really just felt like one disaster after the other. I mean, Kazuki Himino ruled out. Couldn't make that trade about 30 minutes before kickoff. James Lowe was probably one pass away from a try on 5 or 6 occasions, had him as my captain, and then bloody Johnny Sexton. I was urging everybody to stay clear of Sexton, and I thought it was a good call, but he didn't just cross for one try, he scored bloody 2, and even with Jack Crowley on the bench, played for 65 minutes. Just unprecedented stuff. That said though, I'm not hitting the panic buttons just yet. Plenty of time to make up the numbers, it's a long competition. If you're like me, sitting outside the top 5,000 at the moment, don't stress, don't panic. Lots of people ahead of you probably used their boosters or nailed their captaincy option. Things can swing very quickly in 1 week. Look, 3 big lessons I learned from last weekend are players aren't going up or down in price, so don't worry about the cash cows. Incredibly low amount of maul tries. I mean, last World Cup, I think it was like 1 in every 3 tries. This World Cup, hardly any so far. And thirdly, the major blowout games, as expected, it was pretty hard to predict which players would get the bulk of the points because tries are just being scored everywhere. With that said though, the team average was significantly higher than those playing in tighter games. And that leads me on to this weekend. There's some pretty juicy matchups. France taking on Uruguay, All Blacks taking on Namibia, and the Springboks taking on Romania. All 3 of these games could be 50 plus margins, so you'll probably want 3 from each of these teams if you can fit it in. Salary cap being the big killer for this one. To fill in some of the cheaper options, Samoa taking on Chile, they're actually better than I think most people think, so there'll be some absolute bargain buys there. And Wales taking on Portugal, although I have this feeling Wales is going to make this harder than it needs to be. Ireland also take on Tonga, which they should win pretty comfortably. At the moment, the team list is not out, but I'm hoping it updates while I'm recording this. Now, I've received a fair few questions, which I'll address later in the video, whether to go with these Irish players or not for this weekend. The matchups I'm a bit hesitant to go near. England, Japan, Australia, and Fiji. Like last weekend, in these close games, it's really hard for players to go big, and it's a bit more of a gamble than those blowout games. Just to put that into perspective, Ireland had 7 players score 50 plus in fantasy, and Italy had 7 players score 40 plus. Both of these teams almost doubled the average score by starting 15s in the tighter games. Also, I should mention Italy, Scotland, Georgia, and Argentina all on the bye. None of them should be in your starting team for this weekend. Righto, let's move on to some key stats. Only 1 player turned up, Bundy Arki. Well done to those who managed to captain him and even put the booster captaincy on him. Ireland's 10, 12, and 15 all went bonkers against Romania. This week they take on the Springboks. Now, it's important to note, one thing I did pick up on is Ireland's front row didn't dominate and rack up huge stats like many predicted. And while South Africa's bomb squad is a bit of a different beast, it just leads me back to the start here. The 10, 12, 15 scored heaps last weekend. The forwards didn't. Outside backs and fly halves were definitely the top scoring positions in round 1. Fly halves actually managed to cross the line quite a bit, and I see this as a bit of an anomaly. Polar opposite, hookers hardly scored any tries across the opening round of the World Cup. In fact, I read this statistic that second rowers scored more tries from mauls than hookers did. Strange stuff. Ireland had 21 line breaks against Romania, and Italy had 42 tackle busts against Namibia. Expect a lot of attacking stats to come from these teams. Imagine the All Blacks backline coming up against Namibia, who only made 59% of their tackles. France managed to kick the ball 44 times and had the lowest ball in time play. Not only did it hinder the French, it also hindered the All Blacks at scoring in fantasy. Mark Talia had 11 tackle busts against the French, leading the competition. It's no surprise if you saw what he did in Super Rugby, absolutely lethal. He sort of manages to beat defenders without getting too close. It's strange, but he gets just close enough to give him a push. George Ford's drop goal masterclass really blocked the amount of points the rest of the English players could score from tries and try assists. Puts me off in big time. Anyways, the numbers tell an interesting story for our selections this weekend. Let's start with the outside backs. Really keen on the All Blacks and Springboks this weekend, especially. Leicester Ganuku at 7 credits. Absolute buy for this round. 13 tries in Super Rugby. Racks up all the attacking stats. And I hope it's not too similar to James Lowe last weekend where he's just jogging next to the person scoring the try. But he's a great shout at that price. Caleb Clark also at 8 credits. Hasn't been in the best form, but should go well. It's a pretty easy matchup. Probably bags a couple of tries. Just more excited by Fainga'anuku personally. For the Springboks, I absolutely love the look of Kane and Moody at outside centre. 7.5 credits, he should get a lot of attacking upside. And I just loved when he versus the All Blacks. His support play off a crazy Andre Esterhuizen should see him get into some wide open space. Both Mapimpi and Willie LaRue should have a massive day out, and if you have the cash and a spot free, absolutely go for it. The French outside backs are just a little too expensive for me, and I'm not as certain they'll smash the attacking stats. Just a lot of love for Jaminet, but honestly, have a crack at someone who's a bit cheaper, who's a bit more of a notable try scorer. Also, I don't mind the shout of Lewis Rees-Zammit from Wales at 8 credits. Just have a feeling Wales will make this harder than expected. If they are on and they win by heaps, he's the go-to guy. Still waiting for the Irish team list, but yeah, Mac Hansen, I feel like he'll be named. He's a great shout as well. I'm probably going to bring him in. Moving on to the centers, Havili and Lienert-Brown, super tempting. Like, their scores from last weekend don't actually reflect their potential. I'm personally staying clear of that one, but Rieko Ioane looming on the bench is the real reason for that. I'm not too sure who he comes on for. Now, someone I'm definitely keen on and is 100% coming in, locked in, no matter what, Andre Esterhuizen from the Springboks. After seeing the damage Bundy Aki caused at 12 last weekend, you just can't pass up this opportunity. Esterhuizen's such a destructive ball runner, and there's no one on the bench really to replace him either. I think he'll ton up this weekend. I think he'll be the biggest scorer of the round. You can always chuck in the Irish centers if you have the money. Manu Tuilagi from England against Japan. I mean, that sounds like such a juicy matchup, but just the fact England don't score that many tries at all this year, pretty hard to know what to expect from them. I'm just going to stay clear for this round, wait and see. Now, a team I think have some pretty good center options, especially if you want to go a bit cheaper, is Samoa. Duncan Payau playing fullback likely at 6.5 credits, a great shout against Chile. Also, UJ Saltini at outside center. I'm really hoping whichever one of these guys I go with will be my point of difference over other teams and hopefully claw back some of those ranks. Now, fly halves is a really tough decision to make for this weekend. Damian McKenzie coming up against Namibia, I mean, surely he gets some attacking stats. Tries, try assists, or line breaks at the very least. The one thing though really killing me is that Aaron Smith, Richie Mo'unga, and Rieko Ioane all sitting on the pine. Risky business, boys. Lots of love coming in for Ben Donaldson versus Fiji. Not convinced the Wallabies cross for too many tries, and just please don't go chasing all the points from last weekend if you can help it. And what I mean by that is just because they went big in one round doesn't mean they're going to go big in every round from here on out. A lot of people also jumping on Johnny Sexbomb. I know I got it wrong last weekend, but you're dead set crazy if you go with him again. He scored 55 points, and that's including his 2 tries. Beauden Barrett's not a bad shout either, but I think Mo'unga comes in at 10. Damian McKenzie shifts to fullback, so holding off on that decision. If you got the money for Damien Valemsa, chuck him straight in. He'll be really impressive against Romania. I actually couldn't find really any cheap fly halves that I would say are a good decision to make. They led the scoring in round 1. Just pick someone you know will be solid. For me, Valemsa, McKenzie are the 2 that stand out. Boys at scrum half, I'm actually really excited about this one. It's Grant Williams season. Starting on the wing, might shift into scrum half during the game, we'll see, but I'd be much happier if he just sits out there and polishes off tries. Last week, the highest scoring scrum half only scored 37 points, which is what makes me so excited about Williams. A, he's playing in a position that could go big, and B, he's pretty electric for a utility back. For cheaper options, Williams from Wales at 6 credits, every chance of getting some attacking stats against Portugal. Cam Roigard at 7 from the All Blacks, he's pretty dynamic, and Craig Casey from Ireland if he's named. Not much else excites me though, to be honest. If you do really want to cheap out and free up cash, just jump on whoever's named for Samoa. Looking at the back row, the greatest positions in rugby. Pretty underwhelming scores in round 1. I love the idea of throwing in a Samoan Lucy this weekend. Stephen Luatua and Teleni Siu, if they're named, both dynamic ball runners. I know from the All Blacks, Ardie Savea, definite for me. I don't see him coming off the field at all, and he's just bound to get attacking stats. He's a dominant player all around the field, and I don't want him to really burn me. If you're looking for someone super cheap, you're just absolutely scrapped for cash. Richard Hardwick at 2.5 credits. Sure, they'll get pumped, but he takes a lot of carries and makes a lot of tackles. And it might just prove the difference between scoring an extra 10 or 20 points in 2 or 3 other positions, just having those extra credits. Now, someone really tempting for me this week, but I just can't fit him in because I've got too many Springboks. Marco van Staden. Absolute tackle buster, topped the United Rugby Championship for turnovers this year. At 6 credits, he's an absolute steal. Same with his partner in crime, Quagga Smith. Michael Leach and Kazuki Himeno, both cheap, both will score solid every round. Just whichever one of those two are named, just chuck them straight in. If for whatever reason, I don't know what you've done, but for whatever reason you have the money for Irish back rowers, go for it. They should have a pretty good day out again. I just can't justify the money for their potential upside. For second rowers, a position really of luck in fantasy. I'm going to go with Theo McFarlane from Samoa at 6 credits. I just think his potential upside is worth it. And then whoever's named a Tonga for second row, not only because I need to save bulk money, but who knows, they might get a line-out steal or a turnover, but more than likely, bulk tackles. In the hooker position, I still can't get past what happened in round 1. Hardly any points given to these guys. It's also crazy Malcolm Mark's just been ruled out of the Rugby World Cup. Bit of a fantasy beast. It's going to make things a bit tougher for us. Look, to be honest with you, whoever's named hooker for Ireland will probably be my pick. It's just a strategy that's worked so well for me in the past. You could also go with Mbanambi from the Springboks or Takiaho from the All Blacks. Both are good for a maul try as well. It'll just come at a hefty price. If you want to cheap out, just pick a hooker from Japan, Australia, or Fiji. For whatever reason, those tighter games do tend to have a bit more maul tries scored. And lastly, the front rows. Well, Wales have a pretty soft matchup. They might get some turnovers against Portugal. It's hard to tell because it is their first game. Either way, they're dirt cheap. They don't cost much and they don't score too many points anyway, so it won't hurt you even if they do have a quiet game. There's also Gross from France at 4.5 credits. Might have a big day out against Uruguay. Angus Bell at 4.5 is just an absolute steal again. I know he was quiet last weekend, but trust me, he's such a good ball runner, especially for a prop. If you can afford Ellis Genge, jump on him. And yeah, you guys know the drill though for props, just go cheap. Before I show you my team, I just want to respond to a few questions I've gotten in the last 24 hours because I think a lot of people will be faced with these dilemmas. First one, do we go with Bundy Archie if named again? Personally, I won't be. I don't think it's a smart idea to chase last week's points. Coming up against a fresh Tongan side that's probably going to have Malachi Fekitoa and Peter Archie in the centres, both seasoned professionals playing in popular competitions. I don't think he just walks through the defensive line like he did last weekend. Like, he should have a good game, but do I think he replicates what he did last weekend? Absolutely not. Surely Jamine goes huge for France this weekend. Look, I'm tossing this up myself, but there's a lot of things to weigh up. Sure, he'll score a lot of points in base stats from goal kicking, but with Ramos on the bench and not much ball in play time, I'd rather take the gamble on players that have more attacking upside and won't cost 8.5 credits. Do I think he scores between 40 and 50? Yep. Do I see him going up near 100? No. Now, what to do with Ireland against a fresh Tongan outfit? My advice to you is just proceed with caution. It'll probably be a huge win for Ireland, but don't put all your eggs in one basket. Just spread the love. A couple of Irish blokes is all you need. Now, this is my team as it stands, subject to change. Ardie Surveyor is the only player back from round 1. Everyone else on the chopping block. I have the captaincy at the moment set on Fainga'anuku, but that could change. I'm pretty tempted by Kane and Moody, but we'll see. I'll try to keep you as updated as I can in the comment section. You can always just ask me. My notifications are on. Thanks for tuning in.